"Whatever comes," she said, "cannot alter one thing. If I am a princess in rags and tatters, I can be a princess inside. It would be easy to be a princess if I were dressed in cloth of gold, but it is a great deal more of a triumph to be one all the time when no one knows it."
Hi, Dayelle.
Hi, Amanda.
So we're taking it back to, we did Secret Garden,
We did.
and now we're doing a little princess.
We are. And I really love this book because it not only goes perfectly with The Secret Garden because it's written by the same person, good old Frances, but it's such a sweet story of, I think, like resilience and standing up for what you believe when everyone else is kind of pushing you down and making you feel like garbage, which feels like a really good book for
It's
right
weird.
now.
It's weird that that would just go right in what's happening right now.
Yeah. So I guess before we jump into
And we're drinking
to the book,
because we need to.
Let's get some cocktails.
So
in our
we're
hands.
drinking. I was trying to think of something that would be very simple because this is no one's drinking in this book. They're all children.
Yes.
But something that's royal, and
Yeah.
like a very popular cocktail, kind of what we did for our New Year's episode, but different flavor, is a Kir Royale, which is like a classic cocktail made with champagne. And instead of, remember we did like a strawberry liqueur?
Yeah.
This one's made with a creme de cassis, or you
Ooh.
can use like a framboise liqueur, which is just blackberry or raspberry.
Ooh.
And then you garnish with raspberries. And it's a very light cocktail that fits in very well with this time period.
Yeah.
But I wanted to name it something cute, which is like my favorite thing. And I named it Emily's Magic because she's just like,
Aw.
oh, that doll. She's just the
so
sweetest little
sweet.
thing. We're talking about her like she's real, by the way.
Yeah.
And I think that when you make cocktails for like children's books, it just feels weird.
Yeah.
It felt real weird.
Yeah.
But I cared more about the name than what the cocktail would be, but just kind of just for the time period, this fits in really well.
We're just elevating it by making a fancy cocktail to go along with.
And this book was written in what was it, 1988? Or I'm sorry, 1888?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it was 80.
I don't think so.
No.
It was published in 1905.
Yeah.
But just like A Secret Garden, you start with that.
Yeah.
The wars in India and how, Britain was going to war and it's the same setting, right? Like you've got this little girl whose father is super loaded because of his trades in India and then has to go to war. But I don't know about you. Did you watch the version with Shirley Temple, the movie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember watching it when I was
was
younger.
I was going to say, I think I saw that before I had even read the book. Like, I didn't know of the book. And then I had an uncle who really liked Shirley Temple movies. And so that's kind of a random fact, but we would put on these movies and watch them. And that was one of the many.
It's a really cute version. It's very cute.
Precious. It's very precious.
Timeless.
And the little actress, obviously.
So
like,
cute.
she's adorable.
But I'm talking about the version from our childhood in the 90s. And I think that's what I associate with.
Yes.
When I talk about
100%.
Okay.
When I think back, I think of specifically, anyone that has seen it, the scene where she wakes up and there's just like this magical like rainstorm where she's it's just everything. It's just everything. It's a beautiful visual thing. And I love it so much.
The book itself, because we can kind of intersperse with both of them.
Yeah, I think we kind of have to.
Yeah, it's a very short book. If you haven't read it, it's a super short read and you remember this from your childhood. But this is another one of those movies where, just like A Secret Garden, I remember going to the movie theater to see it, the discount movie theater, the $1.50 movie. And the ending to the movie is very different than the book. So
it is. I also, I didn't pick up on this, and I don't know if it's just because when you're a kid, you don't necessarily pick up on time eras and stuff specifically, but I thought this was kind of interesting is the book takes place, it's set in the Victorian era London, And the movie that we're talking about takes place or is set in New York.
In New York,
during World War I. And so that's kind of like a fascinating – I like the fact that they tried to bring it into like the modern time when they brought this to screen for the second time or maybe third time. But I think it's more relatable. I think the one thing that I really loved the way the book ends because it's very real. It's less fairy tale like.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more of the time.
Yeah, your dad wasn't coming home.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's not coming
home.
And
I think obviously spoilers, guys, if you haven't read the book.
If you haven't read it, first of all, we're going to give spoilers in this podcast.
Yeah. And so in the movie, of course, like one of the most magical things that happens is this sweet girl. I mean, if no one has read this, it's a story of this little girl who goes to live at a school to become a lady. And her father in the movie goes off to war.
Yep.
And in the book, he's a gold.
Yep. He wants to strike it big with a gold mine, but he's been dealing.
He's a wealthy investor.
Sure, tradesman.
He goes back to India and he's doing his thing. And like little girls, that's not a place for little girls. So he wants her to go to this, well-renowned school. And so you have this kind of journey, and it's very different in the book. I really appreciated you get much more of their relationship of the dad and the daughter.
In the book?
Yeah. And it's so beautiful because it really sets you up for why she is the way she is and just her upbringing. She's doesn't have a mom. Her mom is not a part of the picture. I'm assuming she passed away.
And she's much more like you get the sense that she's very educated in this version of the movie.
Yeah.
But in the book, you realize why she is so educated. Like her father speaks to her about his works doing trades. She understands the economy. She speaks French fluently. She's very, very intelligent.
She's kind of his right hand.
Yeah.
Man. Like he treats her like as much as he very much wants her to be a child, he also includes her in every aspect of his life. And she's very, very involved. And I love in the book, there's this, as he's bringing her to the school, one of the things that she asks is to have a doll. And it will be like the last doll that she'll get because she's going off to school and she's becoming a lady.
Also getting older. And
right. And
adults don't play with dolls.
It's such a sweet, moment between the two of them because when they finally find the doll.
And she's been searching, for months. Everywhere they go, she's searching for this doll.
It's just everything.
I know.
It's so sweet. And that kind of sets you up. It's a little bit of foreshadowing for what's to come. And this sweet doll is there's a little bit of magic with this doll. Her whole imagination in having this doll is that when you leave the room, the doll comes to life.
It's literally the plot of Toy Story.
Yeah.
I think that whoever wrote Toy Story read A Little Princess and was like, oh, that's great. Because and they do it in the movie really well too, where in the movie, her dad tells her, right?
Yes.
The minute you leave the room, they come to life. And if you need to send me a message, Emily will send it to me,
Yeah.
But they get back really fast. And there's a scene in the movie, right, where she closes the door and then she looks through the keyhole really fast and Emily's still sitting there and she goes, wow, she's fast.
She's so fast.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect point to bring up too. I think one of the differences, obviously, in the book and the movie is in the movie, she gets very upset when her dad leaves, physically emotional, and you see her, and the doll is kind of this, her dad gives her the doll, it's here, she'll be here with you, so whenever you miss me, just hold on to her.
And send her a message and she'll bring it to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the book, she's such a strong little girl. She doesn't get emotional, and everyone's kind of blown away by the fact they're expecting her to be this bratty, spoiled girl.
And she's so emotionally intelligent.
She's
above what's her name? The mean lady?
Yeah.
Madam.
Or even that other little girl who just cries about everything.
Oh, gosh, the little girl. She's
Lottie? Is that
Lottie?
her name?
She's kicking and screaming, having a fit. And she's well, I don't have a mom either. Get over it.
Exactly. I love that. There's just so many elements to this that really speaks to the writing, because I think Frances obviously is, not that she's like bringing stuff out from her own life, but I think like there's a lot of just, she's writing this very strong, intelligent young lady. You know, she's supposed to be, I think, is it 10?
Oh, I don't remember the age, but she's
young.
She's a baby,
so
baby.
Young.
Yeah, so she's like preteen, and she's
kind.
Are you kidding me? She's got the biggest heart in the world.
Yeah.
And everything that bad that happens to her, she kind of just takes it in stride. Like, I wish this wasn't happening to me, but it is. And how can I make the best of it?
Yeah.
And this was based off of a short story that Frances had written called Sara Crewe, or What Happened to Miss Minchin's.
Yeah.
Which was serialized in St. Nicholas magazine from December 1887 and published in book form in 1888. And then she composed a play called A Little Unfairy Princess, which was based on that story. And then her publisher said, you need to expand this because there's so much that little girls
there's so much
around
there.
Like there's so much that they could latch themselves onto with this. Yeah. And then that's how it became this. And I think you're right. There's got to be some portion of her life or who she was or who she wanted to be or the childhood she wished she had in here, because so much of the characters, and it's also really similar to A Secret Garden.
Yeah.
It's this child that's searching for love and finding like, you know, a motherless life.
Yeah. And
what do I do?
Yeah. And I think what's really fascinating about that too is she is so immensely loved by her father.
Oh my gosh.
That she just radiates love. Like her default is to love. And like there are so many moments where, you know, like she's in the school and, you know, things will happen where like one of the girls will be mean or they'll say something or they'll do something. And her initial response, you know, like in her head, she thinks like, oh, all I wanted to do was like scream at her or take her toy or whatever.
Yeah.
But she takes like a moment and she collects herself, and her whole thing is like, how would a princess react? And I
think I need to start listening to our girl Sarah.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even think of herself as a princess. Mrs. Minchin puts that on her.
Yes.
Like, oh, our little princess, she gets the biggest room, all the most lavish things.
Yeah.
And the only reason Mrs. Minchin, who's sucks, is nice to her is because she thinks she's going to get a payout from the father.
Money. Yeah.
Like he's going to be super rich.
Yeah.
He's already super wealthy. So this is where my money's coming from. I better keep her happy.
Well, with that being said too, I love the scene in the movie. This isn't in the book, which is kind of, it's a fun little ad for the movie when she is obviously like, she loses said money and she has to, you know, work off her debt and stuff. And she becomes one of the employed, you know, children of the house or whatever. And one of the things that Miss Mincham says to her is, well, you're not a princess anymore. And she, you know, like most people in that situation would be like, yeah, no, she's right. I'm not a princess anymore. And she like comes back at her and is like, anyone can be a princess.
Don't tell me you still fancy yourself a princess. Good God, child, look around you. Or better yet, look in the mirror.
I am a princess. All girls are. Even if they live in tiny old attics, even if they dress in rags, even if they aren't pretty or smart or young, they're still princesses. All of us. Didn't your father ever tell you that?
And like the quote that I read at the beginning, like that speaks to her
emotional intelligence.
And there's
insanity.
Like a moment where you see Miss Mincham, like obviously in the movie it's visual, so you're seeing this emotion where she's like thinking about what she said in the sense that like, oh, so I could also
Yeah.
be. And it's like a moment, and it's very
fleeting.
short, and then it goes
right away.
But then the sister of Miss Mitchum.
Her name's Amelia?
Yeah, she's precious.
Or Abigail? What is it?
I don't remember
Amelia
her name.
or Abigail?
It might be
like
different too, like in the book and the movie. But she's a very small character, but she's very impactful. Yeah, she's very impactful because
she's the best.
In the movie, she's just this sweet, like, she reminds me of like a Suki from Gilmore Girls character, where she's just like, you love her, but she's also like trying to be supportive of the sister, but also she knows the sister's wrong and she's trying to, and you see that where she sees sweet. Oh my gosh, Sarah. I was like, Emily, that's the doll. She sees her and she's like, obviously the fact that she still leads with kindness and like doesn't come back at her with any kind of, and like even when she's at her lowest point, she's literally walking back, doing all the chores that she has to do, and she's hungry, but she gives her only piece of food to one of the beggar children that she sees. And in the movie, you see then that the Indian gentleman that works for the neighbor, this wealthy man, he sees this happening and is like, she has nothing, yet she gives to this little boy or little girl that is so hungry.
Yeah.
And in the book, it's a little bit different. There's another family who kind of sees this interaction and they tried to give her money and she's like, no, like I've done
nothing for this money.
Exactly. And she does end up taking the money at one point. I think like one of the sons gives her money and he's like, no, please take this. And she goes and she buys like fresh pastry or something and sees a little beggar on the street and gives it to her. And the bakery owner like sees her do this and is like, what made you? And she's like, well, I saw that she was hungry, so I gave her. Or she asks the little girl who was given the stuff, and she's like, she just gave it to me because she knew I needed it more than she did.
And it's also, changes the baker's outlook on life.
It's that path. And now
she brings that little, beggar girl inside.
Yeah.
To be part, make sure she's fed and she
gives her a job.
And gives her a job.
Yeah.
And like, you'll never have to worry about that again.
Yeah.
And I think that's the magic of Sarah is she does that for everybody, even Mrs. Minchin's sister.
Yeah.
In the book, eventually she stands up to Mrs. Minchin, the sister does.
Yeah.
And is like, you're not going to treat her this way anymore.
Yeah.
And there's also a difference in the book and the movie that I thought was really expertly done is in the book, because of the time period that it's set in, the little girl that's working in the house, Becky is like a low level, very low income. You can tell by the way that if you've listened to the audiobook or you read the book, the way that she speaks is very much of that time that, like you can just tell that she's from a very poor family. Her family probably got her that opportunity because it was the only way she'd be clothed and fed, however little it may be.
Yeah.
And that's true to the time period. And then you go to New York in the movie and they have a little African-American girl who's so sweet playing the role. And you have Lottie who says, we don't speak to the help.
Yeah.
And she says, well, why not? And she says, well, her skin looks different than ours. And Sarah says, well, who cares? And she said, that should mean something, shouldn't it? And Lottie's not even sure why she doesn't like a girl whose skin looks different than her.
Yeah.
And Sarah essentially is like, no, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what her skin looks like. And there's Sarah's not saying it to her, but she shows it through her actions to the other girls. Like, no, I'm going to befriend this little girl because she's just like us. She's a little girl that wants a doll and wants imagination and deserves food and deserves clothing.
Yeah.
And that little girl becomes just like in the book. That's her saving grace. That's the only person in the world that can feel the things she's feeling at that time. And I normally don't love when they change big things like that, but I thought it was really important for the time period being set in World War I in New York and how that child was essentially sold to slavery.
Yeah.
To work in that house.
Yeah.
And very different outlook. But I mean, I think it was important, especially when we were watching this in the 90s.
Absolutely.
Let's be honest, racism is still abound today.
Yeah.
And to be a little girl and having Lottie pose that question, she doesn't even know why she cares that the little girl's skin looks different than hers. And she said, well, it's supposed to matter, isn't it? Like, doesn't that matter?
Yeah, because it's one of those things where like they're brought up in this environment where it does matter.
Yep.
They don't understand why.
They're just told
they're
that
being
it matters.
taught that and it's the generational.
It's a really small scene, but it's really important.
It is.
And I loved the way that they did that in the movie. A big difference, but I think it was an important difference.
Is, but I think it goes with the time, and I think it's appropriate for, the new version of that. I mean, new as in, like, it was several years ago.
Well, the 90s just happened. It's the year 2000, 7 years ago.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So I agree with that 100%. I think the other thing that we touched a little bit on is the fact that the ending of the book is very different than the ending of the movie, by the fact that her father dies
in the book.
The book.
He's not coming back.
And in the movie, obviously, she's reunited with her father, which is maybe one of the most emotional.
Are you kidding me?
It is.
Do you remember the movie poster? And it's just her, like, it's like their silhouette kind.
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. It's everything. And I loved the fact that in the movie, the gentleman that works for, it's still the wealthy man. Yeah. It's still, he brings home this gentleman that.
Did you notice that he is on the ship with them when they're coming from India?
Yes.
And he hears the interaction between and he says, like, one of my favorite things to do with your mother was to dance with her, and he like picks her up and dances, and you can see he's standing there with his monkey, and he like overhears it and sees the situation. So I think that a little foreshadowing, obviously, 100%. You don't get that in the book, but
but you still get the magical elements of that in the book, just in a different way,
very different way. But
I
love the way they do it in the book.
I know. And I think that's the thing is, like, in the book, you get, so obviously the father dies, but he dies of a sickness. And part of it is, I think there's a little bit of, I don't know that this is necessarily what Frances was writing, but I think there's a little bit of, like, was there something else going on there where he lost all of his money and he was so devastated by that loss and didn't know how to come back from that he just ended things.
Yes, and there's also this little, like, misunderstanding between him and his partner where he thinks
it's gone.
And his partner has abandoned him and he's got nothing and there's nothing he could ever do about it. Where the partner then finds out that is not the case. Yeah. And so that money is still there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the foreshadowing you get from the Indian gentleman with the little adorable monkey, who then brings things into her bedroom so that
he sneaks them
in. So she comes in one day and she's got this like beautiful bedroom with all these things in the attic, which is leaking and it's freezing. And so he lights a fire. So when she comes up into her bedroom, it's warm. And what's the first thing she does? Goes and gets Becky to come be warm with her.
I know.
And they gosh. Well,
So I think too, like in the book, because of the time frame, also a big factor in how everything kind of played out for the father and the friend is everything is letters.
Yes.
Everything is sent by letter.
There's no phone call.
Exactly. Yeah. And so he doesn't know what happened. He just hears of what happened. And then he receives the letter from his friend, which is literally explaining the situation and that, no, it's okay. He was able to recover the money. And in fact, they made money.
Yeah, with their gold mining operation or diamond mining, something like that.
And I love all those little tidbits because it really explains that story. But then the fact that he knew how much his friend loved his daughter, that his only goal was to find her. And then all of these little like Easter eggs throughout where, like the one family that's coming is talking to him about this little girl that they see and, she must work next door, but like, why would she be working next door? That seems so silly. She seems like she comes from this
She's very wealthy.
proper
she speaks
family.
Well.
And so little by little, there's like this almost like friendship that starts to develop.
Yeah.
And then one day they just like call her over to the house and they're like, and then they realize like who this little girl is. And I think too, like in the movie and the book, Miss Mitchum is way more of a villain in the movie than she is in the book. In the book, she comes off as a very misunderstood. She's definitely out for the money, but she doesn't. It's very much like everyone's opinion of her is very important. And so like the idea of having this wealthy little girl, like, oh, they have a princess at their school. And it's
elevating it to the highest regard. And in the movie, the only reason she goes there is because that's where her mother went before her. So
exactly. But again, I think it works with the time frame. I think because
100%.
they updated it and it, kind of flows. And then obviously in the movie, like she sees her father when she goes into the house with, do you remember what his name was?
The guy?
Yeah. No, I can't remember his name, but the Indian gentleman brings him in. They call him something, and this is terrible. I can't think of what it is, but he is just like the kindest soul, and like he knows that this is her father,
yep.
Right? And the fact that he also knows that the man has lost his memory and doesn't remember her, but knows that if he can just see her and like just
it'll
have
all
that time,
come back. Yeah.
And so they get that moment, but of course he doesn't remember until she's literally being like dragged away by Miss Mitchum, and you're like, this is it. Like she's gonna be thrown in jail or whatever. There's like police officers.
Done. Yeah, she's going.
I'm sorry.
Papa, it's me. It's Sarah.
Sarah, do you know me?
Oh, God, Papa, don't you remember me? Papa, please, you got to know me. It's Sarah, remember? Remember India and Maya? Remember the Ramayana and Emily and the locker with Mama's picture in it?
No.
Oh, God, Papa, please.
Sarah!
Papa, please.
You know this man?
Papa, tell them.
And it's so like heartbreaking, and you're just like, how is this gonna? And then he remembers. And I also loved this other little change in the story is in the end of the movie, Becky also goes and lives with them.
Yes.
Whereas in the book, that doesn't happen. She makes sure Becky is taken care of, but like Becky doesn't go and
poor
live.
Becky. Like at the end, it's like, it's okay, Becky. I'll be back with shoes.
Yeah.
Enjoy your attic. I'm a billionaire now.
Here's a bed for you.
Yeah, enjoy your attic.
Again, it's the time, so you have to kind of like think about when
you're being nice.
Right. You're still being kind to this little girl, but it is a moment where you're like,
here's the thing that I want to say is this movie to me is like peak childhood memory movie, right? Watching it a couple weeks ago when I was watching it for preparation for this, it 100% gives Matilda vibes.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yes.
Like Mrs. Trunchbull as Mrs. Minchin, and like obviously wrote them completely different time periods. But I'm like reading it and I'm like, oh, the magic of Sarah isn't the magic of Matilda. Like Matilda has magic and Mrs. Honey saves her.
Right.
But Matilda's family's awful. But I was just like, there was something so magical about this book. It gave me the same feeling of magic. Like Emily wasn't magical, right?
Right.
But I believe she was.
100%.
In 1993.
Yeah.
Just like I believe Matilda had magic powers. It had that same level of little girl magic.
Yeah. And the same kind of concept of like, even with The Secret Garden, the visual, right?
Absolutely.
There's no actual magic per se, but there's this incredible visual of just like in The Little Princess, like the visual of these colorful, like the bedding and the pillows and the massive feast that's laid out on her table. And it's just such a, like, can you imagine waking up as this little girl in an attic where there's like a little rat or mouse that comes out and she tries to feed the little
no.
And
That's her
then,
only friend.
Yeah.
But this was the movie was Alfonso Cuarón, he did in the Harry Potter movies. Like he's very good at creating magical worlds for little kids.
Yeah.
And the little girl that played Sarah, gorgeous. Her name's Liesl Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
She is beautiful.
Yes, she is.
And when you read the book, she's supposed to be a little girl that's so beautiful that everyone's like, oh, she must be a princess. I think they cast her
perfectly.
I
agree. I think all of the characters were cast perfectly.
Yeah, I agree.
I think like in this remake, like obviously there's been other versions of it, but I think in this one they really stayed true to the core of the story.
The
with their
characters,
casting.
the characters, like who they are inside, matched really well with who they cast. And I cannot think of her name, and I'm embarrassed because she's like my favorite character. Who's the little girl? Not Lavinia. She's the mean girl.
Mm-hmm. Lottie?
Lottie's the little girl who doesn't have a mommy.
Is it the little girl with glasses?
Yes. What is her name?
Oh my God.
This is going to drive me insane because she's like my favorite character in the book and Ermengarde in the book. But I feel like that little girl.
Yes.
And then in the movie, which you don't really get this in the book, but in the book, it's math and like reading that she helps her with. But in the movie, she teaches her French and her dad's there. Mm-hmm. And she like goes over what to say when all the parents are there milling about with their children having a visiting day. Mm-hmm. And she goes over to her father and like speaks French fluently to him. He like yells. He's like, my daughter spoke French. And he's so proud of her. Yeah. And poor Sarah's just like holding Emily, knowing
her dad's
no
not coming.
person's coming through the door.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of no person's coming through the door, talk about emotional scenes in the movie specifically. The birthday party scene.
I cannot. Trauma.
It's so traumatic.
Trauma.
I think like you don't realize, it's this over the top lavish birthday party and they talk about like all the money that was spent and, this is the best of the best and only the best for, this
their
birthday
princess.
Party.
Yeah.
And then literally everything is taken away from her.
And in the book too, they describe it. So like,
they're in having cake.
It's already there. It's already paid for. Mention ya bitch.
Yeah.
And everybody's sitting around the table and they're having a great time. And she's like, throw it all away. Get rid of it. We're done. He's poor.
And she takes the doll.
Let the girl, like it's already there. Let the little girls enjoy it. No, Mention just wants it out of her face because she's looking at all the money she lost spending on it and now realizing she's not getting it back.
Oh my gosh. And also, I don't know if this is in the book now. Now I'm like, I just realized this is like a moment that I was like crushed for her when she takes her mother's necklace.
Okay, that's
just the movie, right?
Yeah, because she doesn't have the mother's thing.
No.
Wait, I don't remember.
I don't think
don't quote
it's
me on that.
It's just the doll.
Yeah.
In the movie, the necklace was such a like precious thing for her.
Oh, when she gets to the school and she's like, we don't wear jewelry. You'd like to wear it in your room.
And they steal it back for her. And then when she gets put up in the attic, Miss Mitchum rips it off of her.
I cannot. The most disgusting. That bitch. Oh, I want to fucking rock her in the face.
Can we talk about redemption? No, that's not the right word. Can we talk about...
We're going to talk about it, though.
Can we talk about the fact that at the end of the movie, Miss Mitchum is a chimney sweep?
Yeah, Miss Mitchum, take that biznatch.
Not redemption. What's the word I'm looking
revenge. No, it's... You know what, guys? It is a word.
It's a word.
And I'm familiar with it.
But we're not going to think about it right now.
It is...
It's the word.
Karma. It's karma?
Karma.
Sure. Oh.
I love that scene so much because it's also where she's like so nasty to that little boy who's the chimney sweep.
God.
Like the worst. And then she works for him.
Do you know what Mrs. Minchin reminds me of? Did you ever watch Downton Abbey?
Yeah.
What's the name of the maid that's like best friends with Thomas Bar? Like,
yes.
And she goes on. She's like a little narc. I hate her so much.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do 100%. She has got that snaky face.
Yeah, and I think it's because of who they cast for Mrs. Minchin in the movie. But when I was watching Downton Abbey, I was like, ooh, this is Mrs. Minchin, bitch.
Yeah, she is. Ooh, oh my God, gosh. What is her name?
Also, do you know what I'm realizing as I'm rewatching this? When I did rewatch it, is remember how we talked about in Secret Garden, how I felt like the pinnacle of beauty for a little girl was that peacoat? Mm-hmm. And then I'm rewatching it, and I have in my brain, my little baby childhood brain, I was picturing the actress playing Sarah.
Yeah.
With that big green bow.
Yeah.
but that girl in that pea coat.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I rewatched the movie, I was like, oh, that's the wrong one. Whoopsie doodles.
But it would work.
I mean, it's the same author.
Yeah.
They live in the same, what was that? They live in the same world.
I know what you meant.
Okay. Words are hard, guys.
It's, it's one of those days where
I think it's just going to be one of those lives.
One of those years.
Yeah. Times 4. But I'm glad we're doing a light one like this because these are ones we may not think about.
Yeah.
People may not be expecting us to do these books, but let's be honest, every book girly read this book when they were little, and every book 100%. Girly watched this movie.
Yeah, and I think like this is the kind of story that kind of gets you started in the whole realm of like book to movie.
Yeah.
Like it kind of is your first taste of
this and Secret Garden, I think are both, I mean, obviously they go hand in hand, and boy are the similarities there. Just time period.
And can we talk about the book the numerous book editions that you can get of
They're
these?
gorgina.
Like I want all of them.
They're gorgeous.
And I did just recently see that they also made like an illustrated version of A Little Princess and The Secret Garden. Yes.
Well, I want those
and
now.
They're stunning. Like they're just so pretty, and they look so pretty on your bookshelf for little, book trophies. To be fair, I never opened this version of it, and so when I did today, I noticed the inner.
It's beautiful.
It is just. It's everything.
I'm gonna end on a depressing note.
Okay, let's hear.
Isn't that fun? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the author, our girl Frances Eliza Hodgson, was born in Manchester, and her father died in 1853 when she was 4 years old, and her family fell obviously into horrific circumstances, and they came to the United States. And they settled in Tennessee, and she began her writing career when she was 19 to earn money for her family. And in 1870, her mom died. So it seems like, I was just looking this up because it seems like there's a theme throughout losing a parent very young and having to parent yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously, art imitates life there. So
yeah, I feel like we kind of saw that in The Secret Garden too.
For sure.
Like there's definitely an overshadowing of theme in her stories, which
makes it more realistic and more heartbreaking.
It does. But I think it does a really good job of teaching, especially like the audience that it's for. It's a much younger audience, and it's real stuff. Like if you read this as a kid, it's heavy because you're reading a story about a little girl who loses literally everything.
Well,
but she still comes up from
who she from the bottom.
Yeah.
Like she's at the top, falls to the bottom, and comes back. Like talk about a phoenix story.
And she never loses her kindness.
I know
she never loses her heart. The resilience of this story is beautiful. And I think that's why we chose to do this one.
All right. And here's the question. Both. I would watch it. I would read it. I think that you get two very similar but different stories. So I'm going to say both. I know people are like, come on, pick one. But for this one, it's a definite both.
Yeah, I'd say both too. And if you have a hard time physically reading books that are, exactly, like that are a harder, like the language is a little bit different, obviously.
Very dense,
so it's sometimes people struggle with like the language. It's kind of like the Jane Austen effect where you want to read it, but it takes you a little bit to get into that language and understand what she's saying. I think with Frances is the same kind of thing. So when you listen to the audiobook version of it, it's great. It's a great way to enjoy the story, and the person that reads it does a good job.
If you need to turn your brain off, go back to the happiness that you had when you were a little kid. Go rewatch it. It's a really good, like, you're sick in bed and you just need something that's a warm hug.
Yes.
You'll enjoy it.
Exactly. I agree. Watch it and read it.
Watch it and read it.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Our editor is Katie Yonner. Our associate producer is Grace Heerman. Our production coordinator is Nicole Vargas. And our senior content producer is Kyle Bosch. Our executive producer is Tommy West. And Watch It or Read It is produced by Gotham West Studios.